It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. I'm excited to talk with my guest today. Joining me is a fellow Badger, Stephen Woessner, founder and CEO of Predictive ROI and host of the great Onward Nation podcast, of which I was honored to be a guest. Stephen, welcome to Accelerate.
Well, thanks very much. Go Badgers.
Go Badgers.
Appreciate the invitation and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, you're actually still a Badger. I'm a part of the diaspora, but you still live in Wisconsin.
I do. Yep. So my wife and daughter and I, we live in La Crosse, Wisconsin, so about 2.5 hours northwest of Madison. But yep, we're still here. We've been here for about 22 years, and really love it. Probably the only place I could see myself moving to, like from Wisconsin, would be like Naples, Florida. Real climate upgrade there. Except for the humidity. Well, amen. But hey, you growing up here, you know that it can get beastly hot in 100% humidity in Wisconsin or 100% humidity in Florida. It's still 100%. So,
and that's why I live in California most of the time. So, is that humidity?
Oh, it is brutal. That's for sure.
I mean, I actually live in Manhattan and have an office out here in San Diego as well, where I spend a lot of time. And people say, "Oh, you must leave New York in the winter because the winters are so unbearable." I said, "No, I grew up in Wisconsin. The winters in New York, they're nothing. It's the summer I can't stand because it's so hot and humid. Get me out of there."
Oh, yes, indeed.
It's one excuse after another to come to California. So anyway, well, thanks for being on the show, and so take a minute to introduce yourself to the people.
Well, so you mentioned the Onward Nation podcast. It's a daily podcast for business owners. We're coming up on June 15th, which will be our 1-year anniversary of
congratulations.
Oh, thanks. I mean, because it takes a lot of time and effort and strategy and planning and execution in order to, one, even create a podcast, and two, to create a really good podcast. And your podcast is certainly that.
Thank you.
And sure. And then to be able to do that over a sustained period of time. It's interesting. Side note. I don't know if it was John Lee Dumas who told me this or where I heard this statistic. Actually, it might be from Don Yeager, a great friend and mentor of mine. He went to a National Speakers Association meeting, and there was a gentleman there doing a presentation about the power of podcasting, why professional speakers should be doing podcasting. And he shared this statistic, and you've probably heard this before. It was news to me, though. And he said that the average podcaster quits, like turns off their podcast, doesn't do another episode at 7 episodes. and John Lee Dumas calls that pod fading. And so I bring that up because, you've been doing this for a while. We've been doing it for, a while. And the really great shows have been doing it for a while. And it takes so much, persistence. And it's not just to be successful in life, you have to be persistent, or in podcasting, be persistent, to be persistent in accelerating sales. I mean, all of that is just kind of this common thread. So we love our podcast. It's been great. And then I own a company called Predictive ROI, which is a digital agency. Really kind of hate that term because we do more than that. I mean, we really dig into a client's baselines or analytics and really their sales funnel and channel distributions and really understand what makes them tick. And then what does make us unique, and many companies do that too, but what does make us unique is the fact that we can look at a client's data and look at their conversion rates and look at their total business, and then be able to say, okay, well, based on that and this behavior that we see here, we believe that sales can accelerate to this. So to go from X to Y in this period of time. And then we're even so bold, Andy, that we will actually guarantee that result outcome, or our fee is free. So we'll write a check back for the amount that was paid. So I'm pretty sure that oddly enough, in a little town of La Crosse, Wisconsin, I'm pretty sure that we're the only company that does that. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. I've written a couple of books and blah, blah, blah. But, that's essentially it.
Blah, blah, blah. So, and just so people understand, is you're not the only one in La Crosse, Wisconsin that does this. You're the only digital agency probably in the U.S. that's offering this guarantee.
I mean, to our knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
that is indeed the case, and maybe there's somebody there that's doing it. We just haven't come across them yet, but as far as we know, we're the only ones.
All right, well, let's unpack that a little bit. So, how often have you had to pay money back?
We've done it once,
Mm-hmm.
and I've at the time our fee was $60,000 a year. It's higher now, but and what's interesting about that is, this client is still a friend today, and so there weren't any hard feelings or anything like that. But the reality is that the way our contract read is that we needed to get 100% of the way there, and if we didn't, we wrote 100% of the money back, and we still made it 82% of the way there. But I still wrote 100% of the money back, and so have had to do that. Don't ever want to have to do that again. But as you might imagine, very painful lesson. Learned a lot. Got better as a result. So, but yes, I have written the check back.
So, what's the lesson for entrepreneurs, business owners that are sitting here listening to this and saying, okay, well, that takes a level of courage or foolhardiness that I don't have. But it's a level of commitment about your business and the service you're delivering, and you're all in when you do that. And is that really the issue for a lot of companies that, yeah, we stand behind our product, but we're not all in. I mean, we're not going to go to that degree.
Yeah, it's interesting. This lesson I learned from one of the most influential mentors in my life and in businesses, and I talk about him a lot during our podcast. And he and I spent a lot of time together in person, and that's Darren Hardy, the former publisher of Success Magazine. And the very first time that I met him was in a private forum there were 23 CEOs, and I was one of them of fast growth companies.
Mm-hmm.
And he had us all kind of in like a U-shaped sort of table. He's in the center and he says, okay, show of hands here, who has a money back guarantee? And I'm like, ooh, awesome. I raised my hand, and I was like I think there may have been one other person. So there's like 2 out of 23. And he says, okay, put your hands down. And then he goes, okay, show of hands, raise your hand if a customer was not happy with your service and they said to you, Annie, I want my money back. Show of hands, how many people would do that? And then everybody's hand shot up. And he's okay, put your hands down. And then he looked at everybody and he said, what in the world is your excuse? Then why in the world would you not just declare, pound a stake in the dirt, put a flag in the ground, something that you would do that? If somebody is going to ask you to do it, if somebody does ask you and you would do it because you want to create happy customers, then why in the world wouldn't you just say that up front and take the risk off the table? And I was pretty stoked because, that was already part of our business model. And I felt pretty good about it. But I think there's some logic in that question, right?
There's a lot of logic in that question. If you're going to do it anyway, yeah, why not make it a virtue?
Mm-hmm.
So, question would be, has everybody in that group now done that?
Now, that is a great question. I know that some have because I've stayed in close touch with probably about 6 or 7 out of that group of 23. The others I can't really speak to, but I do know that it was a very impactful point in that afternoon when we were talking about it.
Well, yeah, it's easy to give lip service to this, and it's hard to actually put it into action. But it seems like those companies that do, the payback's pretty astounding.
It can be. Now, I certainly don't want to give the impression to your listeners, hey, be foolhardy, like you said, run out there, give a guarantee on a business model that maybe shouldn't be.
Well, yeah,
right. And I certainly don't want to give the impression like, hey, if I do put a guarantee on this because my business model supports it, if I do put a guarantee on that all of a sudden their customers are going to come to you in droves and it's going to be peaches and cream. It's going to be running through the meadow, riding, with unicorns,
music in the background. Yes.
Yeah, amen. So, really think carefully about that as a strategy, the consequences, the unintended consequences, the benefits, and really be clear about that.
Well, what was it in your business model that gave you that confidence that you could do that? to that point?
Well, I would love to say that it was like a well planned out strategy. And so I'm offering these words of caution because, I really made that mistake. And I was on the phone with a prospect and we'd built a reasonably, solid business at that point. I mean, we're just getting started. We've been doing this now for about 7 years and we were just getting started. And this is the first time that we had put like a $50,000 contract on the table. Mm-hmm. And because we've been consistently raising prices, and this was like the biggest deal that we had written at that point. And the business owner on the other end of the phone said, all of this sounds good, Stephen. You generating leads and all this sounds good. But would you be willing to guarantee it? We all have those moments in time when, we can like hear this voice, and it's like that Sesame Street thing where you see the words coming out of your mouth. Mm-hmm. And I hear somebody say, well, yeah, I'd be willing to guarantee that. And I'm thinking to myself, is that my voice? Is that me who's saying that? And I can see the words kind of like escaping me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what in the world did I just say? And then the business owner on the other end said, great, then, we'll sign this and send it back to you. And that was the end of the phone call. And I hung up the call and I'm like, yes, $50,000 deal. And I'm like, oh no. My word, what did I just do? And now I have to tell my wife about this. And so I went home and I said, hey, Christine, got this $50,000 deal. It's super exciting. We're going to do this work. She's like, oh, that's great. Congratulations. And I'm like, yes, it's pretty awesome. And then there's this thing. And I guaranteed that. She's like, why on earth would you do that? And so, it has stuck, and it's been great for us. Obviously, we've had some pain points too, but it's helped us do something pretty unique.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things sort of continue the thread of talk about this is that what do you ask in return from the customer? If you're going to do this type of guarantee, what are they going to commit to? Because it can't be unilateral. There has to be a bilateral agreement that if you've got something at stake, what are they committing to do to help you achieve that?
Excellent points. And so again, good relationship with that first company. And where we wrote the check back. I shouldn't say the first company. They weren't the first company we worked with, the company that we wrote the check back. But through that, we went through a pretty deep dive after getting through the depression of writing the check back. And literally, there was a couple of days where I did not feel awesome. And then my team and I, we did a postmortem of that agreement. And it wasn't just me. My CPA got involved and like, okay, and then even our attorney looked at that and said, next time you sign something so stupid, maybe you might want like me to look at that. Mm-hmm. And then we created a brand new contract. We spent $5,000 with our attorney to, write up a better template. And he's like, I can't even believe that you wrote this. This is so anti-you that you wrote this, because really there were no, like, the client is responsible for this. Now, again, that's not being critical of the client. It's being critical of me because I was the one who wrote it. And so now we actually do have company covenants, meaning the client covenants. And there's about 6 or 7 of them, depending upon what the nature of their business, about like pricing and inventory and shipping.
Give some examples. So something specific so that people get a sense. Because I think the money back guarantee, we didn't start out intending to talk about this, but I think it's really interesting because it is something that a company can do, as you said, with the right business model, with the right commitment to process and achieving the goals that you set out to achieve for the customer. It can be very compelling, but you got to make sure you do it right. So what are some ways that some of the covenants that, if you can, a specific example that you embed into the contract that the customer has to live up to?
Okay, so I'll give you some specific examples, but I'll keep the client name confidential for obvious reasons. So first one would be pricing. And so we've had an instance in the past where we've been working with a customer and sales went like up, dramatically at the beginning of their selling season. And we thought, oh, this is awesome. Wow. Everything that we put into place over the last couple of months is now really starting to ignite because this is the hot selling season, kind of a cyclical business. And then all of a sudden, like literally it was like a faucet had shut off. I'm like, what happened?
They'd raise the price.
Well, no, one of their competitors, actually a couple of their competitors got very aggressive on price.
Got it.
And this was not a proprietary product. It was, essentially kind of interchangeable. And, if you didn't want to buy from here, you could buy from a couple of other places. Anyway, and so, in a couple of instances, we found like some of their top selling SKUs were 42% more expensive on our client site versus someplace else. So all that business left. Or in a different instance, so pricing is one of the covenants to directly answer your question. And so it reads something like this, that client X will, or company X, excuse me, will keep competitive pricing. Provider, meaning me, will do periodic surveys of, pricing with competitors. If you're found to be, more expensive, you'll adjust the pricing. Otherwise, that's a breach.
All bets are off, right? Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then second is second example, but there's certainly others, is inventory. You got to have the stuff. Right?
Got to be able to ship it, right?
Right. And so we found an instance where all the traffic was coming, traffic was continuing to go up, traffic was flowing through the site. And the traffic was actually making database calls, looking for particular, products and so forth, right? Looking for the products and wanting to add them to their cart and, presumably to buy. And during that period of time, like in a 2-week period of time, we found millions of dollars in products that were being searched for and looked for, but we didn't have them in stock. And so instead of a customer being able to add that to their cart, they received a, sorry, we're out of stock, please call customer service. Now, that in of itself doesn't necessarily mean that's bad if when you call customer service, you can get some sort of resolution. But in this particular instance, they were 2 weeks out of stock plus time for shipping, and these were like immediate needs, right? And so that there is hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in lost revenue because inventory isn't where it should be.
Right.
And so in those couple of instances, or excuse me, those are a couple of the sort of typical 6, covenants that are in there. And in order to make sure that, like you said, there's bilateral.
Right. I like it. Well, it's good examples for people listening. Can be a great strategy if you have the right process and the right contractual agreement that, there's no free lunch for anybody. And customers are going to guarantees. And I get asked in my business, somebody says, you willing to guarantee results? And we have that conversation about what they're willing to guarantee. And that's usually where it falls apart. Because in most cases, people aren't willing to make the commitments that they need to. They just want the guarantee.
Right. And, and it's what I always have a hard time with. I've been married now, 23 years, and I have a hard time when a client or a customer, for a couple of reasons, will say, well, let's think about how, we're going to get divorced before we get married. I'm like, Now I know the intention of the statement is a good one from the standpoint, okay, if we're going to go down this path and things don't go well, how do we decouple so that, nobody gets hurt and so forth? And I get that. But also there's part of it too, where I don't like the mentality that with some people, it can be very sincere, honest, and there's no like ulterior motive. But I also don't like sort of the mentality that can at sometimes fuel that, which is really playing to lose, or excuse me, not playing to win, but really trying to play not to lose, which then you actually do then lose, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's a sports cliche. We could drag up lots of examples of that you see all the time, like football, for instance. And we were talking about the Badgers. Not that they do that, but you see that in games where teams get a big lead, or they've got a somewhat sizable lead heading into the final few minutes, and they start playing prevent defense, and the other team fills up the field in front of the prevent defense and marches up and scores. Yeah, it's like every time it seems like I always get frustrated with that because it's like, all right, after 100 years of football, we should be able to understand that strategy doesn't work.
Well, and isn't it so maddening too, where you can be watching your team for 3.5 quarters and they may be dominating the other team, right? Now, the score could be close, but it might be like a 10-3 game, right? And your team has a 7-point advantage going into the final 2 minutes or 3 minutes. But the other team has not been able to move the ball all game. And then, like you said, all of a sudden we play prevent defense in order to let them down to our 30-yard line, and they got 90 seconds left. It's like, why on earth would you do that? You've been playing great defense all game long, and now you're playing not to lose. And then you end up, they score a touchdown by some sort of fluke, and then, whatever. You go to overtime, and then you lose. It makes no sense.
Yeah. And you see it in virtually every sport. And yeah, that lesson is true in life as well as in business and in sports. If you're playing just to protect what you have, that oftentimes turns into a losing strategy.
Amen.
All right, we're going to take a short break, come back with my guest, Stephen Woessner, and we're going to keep on talking about how to make money in your business. Be right back. Hi, this is Andy. Connect and Sell is used by sales reps at nearly 1,000 companies, including hundreds of technology startups and several Fortune 500 companies, to overcome the challenges of getting prospects on the phone. Companies using Connect and Sell grow their revenues faster by enabling their sales reps to have more sales conversations in 90 minutes than they could otherwise achieve in an entire week. Connect and Sell can be deployed directly to your sales reps, or you can take advantage of their outbound on-demand service, which delivers qualified prospect meetings scheduled directly on your sales reps' calendars. Visit connectandsell.com to learn more about how Connect and Sell can start filling your pipeline today. Welcome back to Accelerate with my guest, Stephen Woessner. And we were just talking about how his company offers a money-back guarantee on their services and how you might be able to do the same in your business. Great advice there. Wanted to spend a little bit of time in the last part of this show is you have a thing on your website, you talk about 8 money-draining mistakes that companies make that I thought was really good. And we don't have time for all 8, but I did want to get into one that was really liked is you use an acronym of SMART. You said companies don't have SMART goals, and the SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-sensitive goals. I wanted to walk through that so people really understood what that meant and what it means to them. So let's start with where you found that acronym.
Well, here again, Darren Hardy's fingerprints are all over our business, and that's something that I learned from him. And he spent 12 months on our board of advisors, kind of in the early days of Predictive, and that was one of the lessons that he taught to me. And I took that acronym. I'm like, oh, okay, awesome. I really like that. It just kind of fit well with what we do, but also was kind of a good recipe. And I like it because it keeps us from aimlessly wandering through the wilderness. And use another sports analogy, as you well know, like most of the most intense points, the most intense scoring drives, the big breakthroughs happen in the final 2 minutes. And they do that because of the deadline, the timeline, which is really, really exciting. The champions, the great players, they get inspired as the clock gets, fewer and fewer seconds in the hourglass. And so that construct, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time sensitive, really aligns well with our business model, but then it also really forces a discipline of execution, and it forces clarity so everybody knows what it is that we're trying to accomplish.
So specific goals, not too broad. Make them very identifiable. They have to be quantifiable, I guess, to be that specific. What else do you use in terms of sort of define what a specific goal is?
Well, and I think you hit the nail right on the head. For example, to kind of take that a little bit deeper and apply it to our business model, we typically have about 3 to 6 vital metrics that we're evaluating our success on in what we call an ROI scorecard session. We do that every 30 days with our clients. And so vital metric number 1 is typically the increase or decrease, essentially the delta, in unique website visitors over those last 30 days, right? So is traffic continuing to still go up during that specific period of time? And if yes, what was that specific number? And if no, by how much did it decrease and why? So again, it's specific, it's measurable, but there's also an attainable piece to that too, as far as a goal. So we take the baseline and we project that out over 12 months and say, okay, based on past performance, we should see site traffic go from X to Y. Is that reasonable based on the things that we can do to affect traffic? If yes, great. So then that makes it attainable. Is it measurable? Yes. We get the source, Google Analytics, perfect. Is it relevant? Yes, because if we move traffic from X to Y and we can hold conversion rate at X, then based on average conversion value, it's going to equal this then for revenue. And then is it time sensitive? Yes, we're going to do that within 365 days. And so that's from a traffic perspective. And then that filters all the way down through bounce rate, through conversion rate, through average order, through sometimes even long-term value of the customer, then ultimately total revenue. So, but we can keep it all within that smart construct.
Yeah, and I think for this audience, we look at primarily sales, entrepreneurial audience, is we look at those in a sales context. I mean, you have specific goals. I mean, you're trying to achieve X within a certain period of time. And as you said, you're very specific about it. It has to be measurable. And we're not really talking about measuring outcomes as much as talking about measuring process, right? What are the underlying activities that need to take place within a specific period of time in order to achieve the outcomes you want? It has to be attainable, and this is oftentimes the failure I see with companies with sales is, they get into dreamland about what their growth should be, and it's not based on relevant past experience. And it's like, yeah, we're going to grow 10% this year or 15% this year, but we're in an industry that's only growing 5% a year, and we've only been growing 5%. So how are we going to be different? And the time sensitivity is all important when you're setting a sales goal, because you have to say, okay, we got to get this done within a certain period of time. And actually, the shorter increments of time you can use, the better, because then you avoid some of these hockey stick effects with sales and so on happening end of quarter and end of year.
Right. And that's a really great point for your listeners, because the hockey stick looks really, really good on the P&L. But it could look really, really bad on the balance sheet, because if you don't have inventory and you can't fulfill the inventory, or if you have to go into huge debt in order to fund the inventory and it doesn't all sell through and you get return backs. Mm-hmm. So that could really, really be detrimental to a business. And I know that you know this, but more companies go out of business because of indigestion, too much opportunity, than they do in the starvation, the lack of opportunity. So you really have to manage that growth very, very carefully, or it can kill you.
Yeah, I mean, the hockey sticks from a cash standpoint can be fatal, right? We've got a lot of orders, but we either don't have the cash to fund it, or we were starved the previous 2 months and we didn't have the cash to make payroll or whatever. So if you can get rid of use time as a tool to get rid of the lumpiness in your business, it's a really smart approach. Another thing you talked about, and last thing we'll do on this part of it, is lack of differentiation is one that really kills companies. No distinction, you call it. And it seems like that's one of the things that's almost more under your control, that you should be able to be distinct, should be able to be differentiated. And why is that so hard for companies?
I think that, I think it's hard for companies for a couple of reasons. One, it's been my experience because they just don't talk about it. And they make the assumption that, somebody else will figure that out, or our customers know, right? We've been in business for 10, 15 years. Our customers know.
They know what we stand for.
Right. And they don't. Or there's somebody working really, really hard every single day to woo them away from you. And you're not doing anything about it. And that's a problem. And then I think all of those excuses, because that's what they are, all of those excuses come up because it's hard, to actually sit down and ask yourself and your team the tough questions and not take the surface answers. What is it that we do here? And who do we do it for? And what is the result outcome that they get? The value exchange of doing business with us. We do X for Y so they can Z. And in this distinction piece that I learned from Scott McCain, who's like the world's leading authority in distinction and a good friend, is like, I think that most companies, in my opinion, don't go through that process because it's hard and they don't want to look silly for not having done it. And I led one of these sessions. This was, probably 6-7 months ago now, for this one particular client. And we spent 2 hours on this topic, XYZ. and understanding what their distinctiveness was.
Mm-hmm.
And this was not a startup company. This company had been in business for 84 years.
And they still didn't know why customers were buying from them.
No, and it isn't that they're not a good quality company. They're a great company. And it isn't that they're not well respected. They're very well respected in the industry. It's just that going to this depth of really understanding why your customers love you, it's not something surface. You really need to be able to take the time to dig deep and then say, I think we need to go deeper. You know what? I think we need to go deeper. And then finally, after those couple of hours, you figure it out. But it takes time. And it's just really easy to say, our customers know us.
Yeah. The old expression about what happens when you assume.
Mm.
Yeah,
Amen.
comes home in spades, right? And it happens in so much of your business process. We'll take sales since it's a sales show here. Is simple things like following up with leads when they come in. Managers assume that it happens. So one of the great holes, big gaping holes in many organizations and sales organizations is they don't responsibly follow up with their sales leads. And these are the people are proactively reaching out to them.
Mm.
And it's not something studies show maybe 72% of leads don't get followed up.
Holy bananas. 72%?
Yeah. In the business to business world. And so,
oh my word.
So the reason though, primarily it doesn't happen is because the guys at the top think it's happening. They assume it's happening. And when they really start looking at it, they find out, oh, it's not. And this is what you were sort of talking about, is you just assume that your customers know what you stand for, what you do. And this plays out in so many dimensions. I mean, like when you ask a customer for a referral, the big mistake you see people make all the time is you assume the customer knows what you do, or you assume that they know the type of referral that you want. Mm-hmm. So thinking about these things, really your point is being very deliberate and thoughtful and mindful about what it is you do is really the key. You can't just assume that people know, and you really can't assume people within your company know.
Well, holy bananas, 72%, that is just giving me a thought of, is that a trapdoor in our business? I need to find out and investigate. But if I'm one of your listeners, I'm thinking, you ought to be taking this pearl of wisdom that you just received here and take this metric 72% and figure out if that's going on in your business, because that may be a huge money draining mistake. Wow.
Yeah, I talk about in my first book. I had a client that this was sort of an issue with, and they were a very well-run company in most respects. But he had reached a point where sales was sort of slowed up a little bit and a little plateaued, and asked me to come in and look at their process and see what they were doing and what could they do better. And I always start with lead follow-up because that's the fastest and easiest way to find new opportunities. And yeah, they were taking 3-4 days on average to respond to a lead, and maybe they're getting to about 3/4 of them, 2/3, 3/4 of them. So I told him, hey, we can fix this really quickly. In fact, I said, I think I can fix this in 5 minutes. And he said, well, how are you going to do that? And I said, so here's the new scenarios. When you get these leads come in, they got a fair number of leads for a small company. They're getting quite a few leads. They invested a lot, very well in it. I said, they're all going to go to your sales ops person. She's going to put them in salesforce.com and assign them to the reps. And he goes, okay, well, that sort of sounds sort of like we do right now. I said, well, here's the new part. At 4:30 every day, you're going to log on. You, the CEO, are going to log on to Salesforce if you're not on already. And you're going to make sure that all those leads are followed up. And solve the problem the first day.
I bet that was really eye-opening the first day he logged in and saw that there were many leads who had not been attended to.
No, actually, once we told the reps that he was going to be checking at 4:30 every day, they were all followed up. That's how that works. So,
fair point.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so hey, we're going to move to the last segment of the show. I've got some standard questions I ask all my guests, and first one is a hypothetical scenario. And in this scenario, you, Stephen Woessner, have just been hired as a new sales vice president at a company whose sales have stalled out. And CEO is really anxious for things to get unstuck and back on track. So what 2 things would you do your first week on the job that could have the biggest impact?
Well, I'm not going to make this like number one, but I sure as heck am going to use the recipe that you just gave us on that piece. Like, all joking aside, I really do think that that's like super smart, what you just shared with all of us. So I'm not going to make that one of my two things, but I do think that's really smart. So the first thing that I'm going to do, because this is a B2B situation,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get into LinkedIn and having created, I'm just going to make the assumption that I know who our ideal customer is. I know who our avatar is, I know whatever it is. And I'm going to go into LinkedIn. I'm going to find those people. And so this first strategy is going to be LinkedIn. So, but it's going to be multifaceted. So I'm going to go into LinkedIn and I'm going to go into advanced people search and I'm going to build a pool of people who match my avatar. And then I'm going to go to the president of our company, presumably an owner of the business, and I'm going to look at that person's, he or she's profile because it probably stinks. And I'm going to go and I'm going to max out their profile. I'm going to really like bling it out. I'm going to put in, great photos and a great summary about value proposition, what makes us unique and distinctive. I'm going to give them he or she a great title that is keyword laden. I'm going to go and add in videos and like customer interviews, testimonials, get some recommendations, really do everything I possibly can according to LinkedIn's best practices to really build out that profile, make it super robust. Then I'm going to take our existing email list and I'm going to load it up into LinkedIn and make sure that I'm personally connected to all of the people that we currently do business with, as well as our prospects. I want to at least connect with them on LinkedIn through the president's account. And that does a couple of things. One, it not only increases our connections, which are valuable, and I'll cover that in just a second, but then also it gives us dual platform. We can now connect with those people through LinkedIn, and we can connect with those people via email. So we kind of cross-pollinate. But then for your listeners, the reason why you want to increase the number of connections, like right now I've got about 3,300 or so connections in my LinkedIn account, but that gives me visibility of about 17, 18 million people through advanced people search. And so you want to make sure that you take that president, the figurehead of the business, and increase the number of connections for that person so that when you go in then to create this pool of prospects, you just quite frankly see more people. Then from there, after I have my pool of prospects, I'm going to then make sure that we have a premium account so that I can send probably 30 to 50 or so in-mails a month. I'm going to write a very short, concise, value-driven, ROI-focused in-mail where I send out to our top prospects between 30 to 50 times a month. And I invite them to either a private conversation with the president and or maybe a private like Q&A or something like that. In order to start generating high value leads from our most valued prospects directly to the president, because there's a lot of value in very important top officer talking to very important top officers. So that would probably be the first thing that I would do.
Okay, great.
Second thing,
yes,
is I would then create a fantastic, if you want to call it a freemium, if you want to call it a value exchange, if you want to call it a lead magnet, I don't really care what you want to call it, but I would create something like that is so screaming cool, and I would advertise it via popover and some banners and that kind of stuff throughout the site, that when your target audience sees it, your avatar sees it by cruising through the site, they look at that and say, heck yes, I want to download that for email address only. And I know we probably don't have time to talk about that, but as to why, but
today. We'll be back.
Email address only in order to start building the list. I'd do those two things.
Okay, cool. All right, now just a couple of rapid fire questions for you. So when you, Stephen Woessner, when you're selling your services, besides your guarantee, what's your personal most powerful sales attribute?
Boy, that's a good question. I've had some people say to me that it's just my sincerity, that it's just my, caring, giving nature. And that I guess with that, in fact, this just happened yesterday, that I'm pretty transparent. It's like what you see is what you get. And so I think that helps, make the sales presentation, that is very data driven and so forth, just make it more personal.
Good. So I think I know the answers. Your business role model is?
Boy, my grandfather, Peter Marinitis.
Okay. What do you do? Quickly.
He was in the restaurant business for 42 years, but he immigrated here to the U.S. in 1920 without any money, didn't know the language, and in 6 years had saved all his money, opened a restaurant in downtown Canton, and slugged it out through the Great Depression, was very successful, and family was always first.
Excellent. One book every business person should read.
The E-Myth Revisited.
Yeah, Michael Gerber. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Last question for you. What's on your playlist these days?
Oh, goodness. Wow, there's a lot. But the first one that comes to mind, or I guess couple that comes to mind in my Audible list are The Richest Man in Babylon and Scaling Up Then by Vern Harnish. The E-Myth Revisited again is in there, and then I'm forgetting about 4 or 5 other ones, but that's a good start.
Yeah, fascinating how you went to books instead of music. Usually most people answer music. All right.
Yeah, kind of lame.
Nah, it's great. So anyway, I want to thank you for being on the show. So my guest today is Stephen Woessner. Stephen, how can people find out more about you?
My direct email address is Stephen with a PH, so STEPHEN at Predictive ROI. You can find us, or .com. You can find us at predictiveroi.com or onwardnation.com.
Perfect. And remember, friends, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. Easy way to do that is to make this podcast Accelerate a part of your daily routine, listening on your commute, in the gym, or as part of your morning sales meeting. That way you won't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Stephen Woessner, who shared his expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.